Hey folks, welcome to the channel. Today I'm just going to talk about my HELOC search. So for those who don't know, a HELOC is a home equity line of credit, and it is a sort of a credit card based on your home equity, and it allows you to lock into a particular rate, either fixed or variable, and it is drawn based on equity on your home as mentioned, and you can have different terms based on your need for your line of credit. There are certain factors that impact a HELOC or home equity line of credit. Of course, I guess the biggest one would be how much equity do you have in your home. For example, I'm going to give you my case. I owe roughly $90,000 on my loan, my original loan for my home. The home is worth roughly $300,000. So I have about $210,000 equity in my home. So arguably I could get a line of credit roughly equaling that $200,000. I personally don't want a line of credit for $200,000. So for me, my line of credit that I was looking for was $50,000. The other thing that will impact, of course, is local market and conditions. And they actually have someone come by and either come into your home and look at it or just drive by. In my case, the one that I ended up going with just had a drive-by. And then they performed an analysis, made sure my house was here, I guess, and looked at the neighborhood and the conditions around here and gave a report to the lender for final approval. Of course, the lender policies, whether they even offer HELOCs, also comes into play, whether or not they allow you to have certain draw periods or whether or not they allow fixed or variable rates. All of those things will come into play on what they will be willing to offer you. The credit score is also a factor up to a point. If you have a high credit rating, then you typically get a better rate offer. I think that there's a limit to how much you can improve it. I think if you're in the high 700s, you're in pretty good shape. My credit score is 820, so I was able to get the best offer that the lender was able to provide. Whether or not you've been at your job and how much you make is also important to the lenders. They're going to be looking at that and they're going to be asking you questions about that. The other thing that they look at is the debt to income ratio. My debt to income ratio is roughly 16.5%, and they take that into consideration. If your debt to income ratio is too high, they won't offer you the home equity line of credit. So this document right here, you can get this on my Facebook page. It's just a little infographic that helps show what those things are. The other thing that I am going to share is a comparison sheet, and this just was these were the questions that I was initially asking, with the exception of these. These came later. All of these questions were questions that I either knew to ask or learned to ask after the first person that I talked to. And then one of the things that I found after I talked to the first person, I went into ChatGPT and I said, hey, ChatGPT, help me out, because I asked these questions, and even though I ended at the very end with the question, hey, is there something that I haven't asked or that you would like to tell me about this line of credit that I'm looking at that would help me make a decision in the end, even though I had that open-ended question, I asked ChatGPT to give me a list. And I did have a lot of the questions already asked, but they had some other things that I still don't know what are, like the maximum combined loan to value allowed. My I guess that maybe that's a cap on the amount of money that you can get. But I'd never looked this up because it didn't seem like it was relevant for me. But there are a lot of questions here that are asked in a different way than what I asked. So my suggestion to you is when you get started working on this, that you first look at this and you say, okay, yeah, these are all the questions I think I want to ask, but then look at this and really deep dive into what ChatGPT said are the questions that I need to be asking about this. I'm going to go over this in just a minute, and we're going to talk about some of these, but at first I'm just going to talk generally about this quick comparison guide. So this is an example, and this is just a combination of actually all three of the good solid quotes that I got from people. I just put some different information in here to create one example. The loan basics are what you're going to tell them you want, right? So if you think in terms of how much money do you want to ultimately draw or potentially draw, how long you want to be able to draw from that line of credit, and then how long do you want to take to repay it. And once you give them those details, typically they'll be able to give you what the rate is, be it fixed or variable, and what the closing fees are. And the closing fees are, the origination fees and the closing cost. They may also include third-party fees that the lender may have. And there's actually more detail on the ChatGPT response than what you see here. The other thing that's very important for you to ask is whether or not there are any annual or inactivity or even early closure fees, because some lenders don't want you to close your line of credits sooner, right? They want you to keep that going as long as they can so they can collect the interest for as long as they can. Even in such a way that, during the draw period, some of them during this draw period, you can't pay on your principal. You can only pay on your interest. Okay, and that's very important. Because not only will that limit the amount of money that you can ultimately borrow, it will also increase the amount of money that you're going to have to pay in the long run. Let's see, what else is on here? It's like, how will you get the money? How long does it take? Even though almost all of them talked about their reputation, I didn't have anything concrete until ChatGPT mentioned it. And ChatGPT was able to get me all of this information, right? They were able to tell me specifically what these things were just by asking them, can you look up their reputation? And it was pretty great. And I would say, okay, well, give me a side-by-side comparison of these three lenders. And ChatGPT was able to do that for me. They all basically had the same complaints, honestly. And I think they were, things like this: they didn't respond quick enough, I didn't get my money fast enough, there was a fee that I didn't know about, things like that. So when I got around to looking at the very final draft of the one that I chose, I was very sorry, I was having some technical difficulties. I had to pause just a minute because my headphones cut off again. Okay, so when I got the final draft of the agreement, I went through it with a a fine-tooth comb to make sure there were no references to any types of fees, that the rate that they said that they would offer was fixed, and it was the amount that they had said that they would, and that all of the fees were disclosed within that document and they equaled the amount that they originally said. So I was just very careful. I actually looked at my documentation to make sure that all of that was in agreement. The other thing, so again, ChatGPT just came out with a really, really good, very thorough list of things that should be asked. So even if you maybe narrow down some of the questions that you ask during the initial conversation, you do need to address some of these, I guess, when you make your final decision. Just make sure you answer all these questions. And I did when it got down to reputation, and I was talking to the person that I chose in the end. I said, look, there were a couple complaints out there about fees, and I said, I'm concerned about that. And I said, I will be looking at the information, but can you tell me about it? And he says, well, no, I've told you all of the fees. We've looked at the documentation. I can't answer the question about who was complaining about fees. I think everything is upfront. So I did actually talk to him about that. And based on everything that I saw, I felt confident that even though there were some complaints, that in my case, I would not have those similar complaints. So ChatGPT had it broken up into these different areas. So loan structures, like what is your limit? So that's like the 50K that is my limit. That would be what would be the comparable. What is the initial draw? So the second person that I talked to, they were the first person that I learned that you don't have to have like 100% draw. They said we can do 75% draw. And let me tell you why this matters. Because what your initial draw is, it controls what these closing costs and all of these other fees are. So if, in this case, if I had 100% draw, this number would have been higher. But since I only had a 75% draw, then this number is based on how much money that initially comes out, which is very interesting. I did not know that, and that was something that I learned during this process. So that's important to ask. Then it's like so what's going to happen with the loan is they're going to disperse a certain amount, and then I'm going to put most of it back into the loan. Because the fees are included in there, my balance starts out at $51,666. That's what the amount is. But I plan on putting almost all of it back into the loan, so it's actually zero, or as close to zero as I can get it. Because I don't want interest to be charged on that balance while I'm not using the funds for its intended purpose. Okay? And it's also why I chose a line of credit instead of a loan. If I just wanted a lump sum amount of money, I just would have got a loan. I might have been able to get a better rate. I don't know. But no, that's not how I wanted to do this. I only wanted to actually borrow the amount of money that I actually needed. And it could be $50,000, but it could also be $30,000, right? So I wanted to be in control. So the initial draw, they're going to drop the money into your account. You repay as much as you need back, hopefully all of it or as much as you can, because you will have the fees in there to begin with. But then when you're ready, that's when you start drawing off it. And then what they're saying, well, what's the minimums? How much can I draw? And the one that I chose is $500. But I think another one was $1,000. So it can vary, and you just need to ask that question because it could be important to you. I don't know what the loan to value is. I did not look that up. I wish I had done that now because now I feel a little stupid showing this to you and not knowing what this is. But we can look that up. Maybe I'll post it in the comments after the fact. So the repayment term, that's how many years that you're going to have to pay this out after your draw period. In my case, it's 20 years. The repayment method is amortizing versus balloon. I think most of them are all amortizing, but you do need to ask that question. Variable versus fixed. I am risk averse. If I come into an agreement, I want to kind of know what I'm getting into. So I chose fixed. Now, a lot of these questions after the fact are specifically based on whether or not you have a fixed or a variable, like whether or not they use prime or SOFR. Sorry, I don't know what SOFR, but I do know what prime is. And then what is the margin over prime or SOFR. So in one case, a gentleman quoted me, it is prime minus 1/8%. So that is how my variable rate with that particular lender would be managed. Also, is there a rate cap or rate floor? So in the case of this one guy who offered a variable rate of 7.375, is the floor going to always be 7.375, or will it be able to go down when the interest rate's lower? If it does go up, how high can it go? Is it going to go up as high as 20%, or is the cap going to be 14%? Ask those questions if you are going to have a variable rate. Conversion options, are you planning on, if you think you might want to change it, do you have that option later? The payment type. So this has to do with during your initial draw period, are you allowed to pay on the principal, or are you only allowed to pay on the principal and interest? So that's going to make a difference because in the end it will impact how much you end up paying for this HELOC in the end. In the case of mine, I can, during the initial draw period, let's just say I need to borrow $3,000 to do something, and I want to go ahead and pay it off so that that money will go back into the line of credit and I'll be able to borrow again 6 months from now for something that's going to cost me $30,000. Well, in some cases, if you're in the draw period, you're only allowed to pay interest. You're not allowed to buy down the principal, and that's going to ultimately cost you more money in interest. So that's a good question to ask, and you really should know that. Are there penalties for paying it early, for not even having a balance on it? And that is also talks about fees and costs down here. So there are some do add it, but in my case, the one that I got, there's no penalty. Fees and costs. The origination and the closing fees are part of that initial cost when you close on your HELOC. There are also third-party fees that may come into play. Appraisal, title recordings, sometimes it's just an extra line item in there. Generally speaking, you just need to really look at your documents. When you get that final document that lists all that stuff, you just need to go over it with a fine-tooth comb to make sure that what they said the fees are going to be are actually what they are. The other thing you want to do is make sure that they're not going to charge you any extra fees either annually or monthly if you're not using your draw, or even if you close it out, right? Make sure that you get those up front and disclosed. If you want to use fixed, they'll charge you like a rate lock fee. If you've ever purchased a house and been part of that closing, you'll recognize some of this language is all the same because it's essentially doing the same thing. It's borrowing off of your house. All right, and access to funds. Here we go. Sorry, my mouse just does some weird things sometimes. So how do you get the funds? Check, ACH, most of them are all online. None of the ones that I was talking to had anything to do with, I'll send you a check. No, they're mostly ACH, but you do need to get that up front. How long does it take to get the funds after closing? So in my case, I started searching 1 week, 2 days ago. On Friday, which was 2 days ago, I received notice that my loan had been approved and the funds will be dispersing. And so that was roughly 1 week after I began the process. I was able to secure the loan. They said that the funds will disperse in 3 to 5 days. And I think the holiday weekend had something to play with that. So I expect this week to have $50,000 put into my account, of which roughly $45,000 or $46,000 will go back into the loan so that there's a limited amount of balance. Now, can you reborrow from the repaid principal? That means if like they give me $50,000, I put $45,000 back in, can I still draw off of that $45,000? And typically that's yes, but you just need to make sure that that's the case. And how much time between draws? So let's just say, for example, you hire a contractor and they're working on 3 or 4 different things around your house. And so first you pay them a deposit. And let's just say that deposit's $10,000. And then 2 days later, they said, hey, I need a deposit for the plumber. And he needs $6,000. Well, if you just drew money 2 days before, are you allowed to draw another 2 or 5 or 8 or whatever amount of money a few days later? These are the questions you need to ask, because particularly if you're dealing with a contractor or a number of people who are doing work on your house, you may need to be drawing those funds at different rates. So just knowing that's going to be helpful. So this was great for me. What ChatGPT did for me was a lot of this information. They were able to pull all this information for me, get all the complaints, analyze those complaints, and determine whether or not I need to ask those extra questions. And you know what? I did ask those extra questions. So when it came down to making the final determination, I said, hey, I have these reports about your company. I've had them say you're not disclosing all of your fees. That was actually one of the things that was in there. And then I also had a complaint about timeliness. And because I had been dealing with the guy and he had been extremely timely in my communications, I didn't feel like that was a valid. It could be the guy just had, a poor agent that was helping him through the process. But I was concerned about the fees that weren't disclosed. I said, help me understand and help me make sure that you've disclosed every single fee. And I did have a question in the thing. I said there's, because he originally quoted, I think he quoted $24.95 in fees, but the fees actually ended up being $26.66. So there was one fee in there that he did not have on his list that was going to be there, which was fine. It's not that he hid it on purpose. He just did not know that it was going to be in there, because you have to understand that the people who are chasing down the loans are not the people who are going to be owning the loans. And a lot of times they're dealing with different companies who they're going to pass this loan to, and maybe they have different rates and fees. So as long as you are doing your due diligence and you're checking those, everything in the loan documents prior to approval, you should be in good shape. And just FYI, even though the rate, actually I think it was $14.95, not $12.95, $24.95. Well, anyway, even though the amount that I was going to be paying in fees was, I think it's exactly $16.66, my next best rate the fees were $16.67. So the amount of difference was minimal. But the other one, their rate was 7.75. So the fees were roughly equivalent, but the rate was different and the draw was different. And I really wanted that longer draw. So okay, so let's go back. Service, are they selling it here? This is what, just case in point. Does the original lender keep servicing or sell to another company? Typically, you're going to have it being sold. And again, if you've ever had a mortgage, this is like standard practice. Do you have a mobile app or online portal, which typically is going to be yes, and auto pay. And yes, I'm doing auto pay on the minimum amount. And that actually gave me a discount. Doing that auto pay. Reliability, there were a couple complaints about not being able to reach someone, but that was during the initial search, so I feel pretty confident that things are going to be okay with respect to availability. And then finally, if we think in terms ability to fix portions of balance at a set rate, well, I had nothing to do with hybrid HELOC, so I did not need to look into that. And this is the same thing, lump sum pay downs, flexible repayment options. That was important to me because my anticipation is that I am not going to have this for 20 years. They didn't mention any discounts. Actually they did. They said it. Yeah, there was something built into it. If you were a part of the credit union, you got a little bit better rate, and I just was automatically a part of the credit union. Now that I'm thinking about this, in this particular one that I did, I got just a little bit different, a little bit reduced rate by being a member of a specific credit union. And there was no fee to being part of the credit union. My name just got put into some random pool. I'll probably get lots of mail, texts, calls, emails, but it's worth it because I have a better rate. Can you refinance or transfer? I did not ask about that because I have no interest in that particular feature. So these are the basics. At a minimum, you should be asking these questions. Better yet, go ahead and look at what ChatGPT had to say after the fact and make sure that you, even if you don't ask your initial three lenders all of the questions, your final person that you talk to, you should answer all of these questions, and you should make sure that you have vetted what they have said to what is on the document that you receive to approve the loan application. And that pretty much does it for that. You can use this as a guide to get started. Just kick off your process. Keep in mind, this is just, I'm a normal person, and I don't know all the ins and outs about HELOCs. I don't know all the ins and outs about how to ask these questions, and there could be questions that I missed. Right? So take everything that I just told you with a grain of salt and absolutely do your own investigating and make sure that you have all of your bases covered. Because if you're asking somebody to give you a line of credit of $50,000, that's a lot. That's a lot to be responsible for, and you just need to do your due diligence in the same way I did. First by asking questions, and then by asking additional questions. Again, I love ChatGPT. Now, so this is the second part. Most of you will probably drop out. This may be all you need to know, or maybe you just wanted to know where that, what this comparison sheet looked like. I don't know. You might have dropped out 45 minutes ago. I don't even know how long this video has been going. So how am I going to use this $50,000? And it's going to happen over the next few years. So the first thing I need to do, which is obvious, is that stairwell that leads into the bottom portion of my split level home. It has been slowly buckling over the few years, but this last rain that we had, it really has buckled in even more, and the amount of water that was coming in through the cracks in that stairwell was alarming, and it was a mess. It was bad. The amount of water that was pooling in my stairwell and then ultimately, of course, pouring into the basement. It Yeah, it was bad. So I just need to mitigate that. I need to have someone come in and pull out the old stairwell, give me a quote on how much that would cost to replace with a new stairwell. Also, additionally, I'm going to ask them to tell me how much extra would an awning be, because I think an awning over that area would help mitigate some of the water flow that went into the stairwell. The second, and I believe equally important part of doing that, getting that whole water issue mitigated, is to do an additional grading on my lawn to get the flow of water controlled better, because there's a path of least resistance in the back right corner of my yard, and water just floods down there when we have heavy rain. I have had regrading done in the last few years, but it just didn't quite do enough, and I don't think they did it quite right either. So I want someone to come in, put some pipes down underneath, I think they call it a French drain, or I don't know, some type of drain where it actually controls it a little bit better. Somebody just needs to come in with more knowledge than I do and get that fixed. In addition to that, there's a couple of other small, like landscaping items that need to be repaired in my house. So those are the first two immediate needs. The stairwell, I expect, could be in the upward range of $20,000. The work on the lawn could be roughly $15,000. Could be more, could be less. It's just my estimate. I have already put in calls to have people come by and start quoting me on the stairwell. I will be contacting some landscapers in the area to give me quotes for the work on regrading and drainage mitigation. But that's like for the immediate. In the somewhat longer term, probably maybe thinking spring, I am also going to have some work done on my deck that I've needed to have done. I've had a couple people come out and look at it and that were supposed to get back to me, and this is over the course of the last like 5 or 6 years, and they just never call me back. I don't know whether it's too much work or not enough work for them, but whatever. I'm going to do that, and also replace some handrails at the front porch. They're metal, and one of them just is all bent and it doesn't secure into place. So I'm going to replace those with some composite materials around the front porch. So those two will go together, the back porch and the front porch. Additionally, so I'm thinking in terms of like at the end of the 5-year period, hopefully I'll have paid off all of this by the time I get to like the last 6 months or so of the draw period. I will likely be replacing a couple of windows, and at that point I probably will have to be looking at my roof. And I don't even know if $50,000 will cover a roof, to be honest with you. I think it will, but I'll have to do some investigating. But the roof and the windows together, $50,000, I don't know. I will have to play that by ear, but I don't need those done right away. Those are going to be farther on down the line once I have repaid the vast majority or all of what is happening right now. So that's how I intend to use it. Now, hopefully some of this information is going to be helpful to you. Again, this is just me, a normal person starting out learning and trying to get as much information I can so I can make the best decision for me and my needs. So my next video will be the YNAB reconciliation. So that should be a little bit later today. If you have any questions about what I've done, what I've talked about here, if I have miscommunicated something or you need clarity on something I said, don't hesitate to drop a comment down there. I do look at them every day and I will respond. So I will talk to you in the next video.